continuing education of actuaries who are focused on property and casualty risks. Our CAS members are experts in property and casualty insurance, reinsurance, finance, risk management, and our members really help business and government to manage their risks. And we recently reached a milestone of 10,000 members in the US, so we're celebrating that quite a bit right now and over the next several months. And we're also really happy to be co-hosting this event with the Network of Actuarial Women and Allies, or NAWA. They're an organization whose mission is to connect and empower women of all backgrounds, races, ethnicities, and life circumstances to be successful in the actuarial profession. And you'll hear a little bit more about them later. So since most of the people in our audience are not actuaries and may not be studying to be actuaries, I'm going to provide the very briefest of overviews of what an actuary is, what we do, and why it's a great career. And then I'm going to turn it over to our speakers to give you a taste of how each of them has navigated their career. So actuaries deal with the financial consequences of risk and uncertainty. We help ensure that people and businesses can stay financially stable for the long term in the face of everyday risks, things that you often can't avoid. In order to do this, of course, we employ mathematical analyses to estimate the likelihood and timing and cost of future events, things that haven't happened yet. But we also cultivate a really strong understanding of the businesses in which we work, the financial system surrounding them, and the market forces that impact them. And because our models and our estimates are often really key to decision-making in our industries, actuaries also have to develop strong cross-functional communication skills to convey information to both technical and non-technical audiences, which can sometimes be a challenge. So we're really looking for people who are excited to combine their math skills with business knowledge and their communication skills to really excel as an actuary. Actuaries come from many different backgrounds and work in many different industries. So you can study actuarial science in school, but you don't have to. There are a lot of other majors that will give you some of the skills that we need, like math, finance, even engineering majors have joined the actuarial profession. So no matter where you're at right now, this might be still a great career for you. Actuarial exams, if any of you have heard of those, they really ensure that even though we may all have different educational backgrounds, we all share the same foundational knowledge that we need to perform our roles well. And then we can take those skills to a lot of different industries. So actuaries work in insurance, employee benefits, financial services, and all levels of government as well. And then last, I can't leave you without sharing a few other reasons why I think you might want to consider becoming an actuary. There's just so much potential in this career. The sky is the limit. So I mentioned, many people take actuarial exams. Often people take a couple of actuarial exams in college, but complete most of them while they're working and earning money. And employers support that with study time and exam raises. Most employers do. Actuarial exams also help provide a pretty transparent path for advancing early in your career, and earning a credential like an associateship or a fellowship in one of the actuarial societies can open a lot of doors for advancement in our industries. We're also working on a lot of really interesting issues like climate risk, cyber risk, automated vehicles, health equity, and so many more. You'll hear from our speakers about some of the areas where they've worked. So we're needed in a lot of these hot topics. And there's a lot of opportunity just in terms of the number of jobs we're expecting. We're expected to grow about 20% over the next 10 years. And actuary has been consistently ranked as a top profession in the US. So I hope that after today, you'll all be really excited and consider this profession as one that you'd like to move forward in. And I know that was a really high-level overview of what actuaries do. So I'm so excited for each of our speakers today to share their perspectives on what they do, how they've navigated their careers, and any advice to those of you who are considering this path, or maybe are already on this path. So our first speaker today will be Amber Rohde. Amber is a fellow of the Casualty Actuarial Society, and she currently serves as AVP and actuary and head of actuarial and advanced analytics for catastrophe risk management at Travelers. Amber has been in the property and casualty insurance industry since 2004, and she has experience worldwide. She's a founding board member of NAWA, the Network of Actuarial Women and Allies, and is the nonprofit's very first president. Amber is also an active volunteer for the CAS and was elected to our board of directors in 2022. Following her will be Kura Chibanda. Kura is a fellow of the Casualty Actuarial Society and serves as the Chief Data and Analytics Officer for the former Navigators Insurance business, a brand of the Hartford. In that role, she leads teams of data scientists, data engineers, business intelligence developers, and performance analysts in the design and implementation of analytics for underwriting and operations. Kura studied actuarial science at St. John's University, and she also recently completed a term on the CAS board of directors. Next, we'll hear from Celeste Bremen. Celeste is a fellow of the CAS as well and is a senior actuary at New Energy Risk, where she uses Monte Carlo simulations to price the risk of various clean energy projects. After graduating with a BS in economics from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, she began her actuarial career with Zurich Insurance in the US. She also worked for Zurich Brazil Seguros in Sao Paulo, Brazil for 2 years, where she became fluent in Portuguese. And last but not least will be Sherry Chan. Sherry is a fellow of the Society of Actuaries and currently serves as Chief Strategy Officer of Atidat, and I may have pronounced that incorrectly, so Sherry, you can correct me later, an insurtech startup that provides predictive analytics and artificial intelligence to the life insurance industry. Her previous roles included New York City's chief actuary, the chief actuarial officer for the Ohio Public Employees Retirement System, and chief actuary for the State Teachers Retirement System of Ohio. Sherry has an executive MBA and Bachelor of Science degree in mathematics and actuarial science from The Ohio State University. She also serves on the boards of the American Academy of Actuaries, the Ohio State University's College of Arts and Sciences, and she was a founder of Abacus Actuaries, which is a nonprofit dedicated to supporting Asians to achieve success in the actuarial profession. So we've got an amazing lineup for you today. And just a reminder that you'll be able to sign up for one-on-one sessions with our speakers through the link that we'll share in the chat for next week or following our session. So if you don't get your questions answered today, please sign up for those so you can hear from them next week. We'll keep all questions to the end. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass it over to our first speaker, Amber Rohde.
All right, let me try to share my screen here. I think I shared the wrong thing, so give me a second. There we go. I'm going to presentation mode. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, good. And then I want to make sure I can see you all. So you don't see yourselves, do you? Because I'm moving you on that screen. Okay, good. All right. Well, Malika, thank you so much for that really kind introduction, and hello all. I'm absolutely honored to be here to share my journey with you. I want to say one thing, Malika, you did a really good job at talking about what actuaries can do, and then you said, you're going to learn more from these folks on what all of us have done, but there are just so many possibilities with our field, and we probably won't even scratch the surface with it. So, but you'll find there's a theme in what I want to talk about today, and that really is that the more people you can talk to and learn about their journeys as well, especially with the actuarial field, I think there is a lot of possibilities there. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm not going to bore you with this very long bio because Malika already introduced me, and also because the whole presentation is essentially me talking about my bio anyway, so we're going to skip this. But I do want to point out one fun fact about this, and in particular my picture here. I cringe every time I see this picture, actually. Um, I was interviewed for a magazine called Diversity in Action, which, funny enough, Malika, you were also featured in the same article. So that was pretty fun to have us both be in there, and other great women in financial careers as well. But they asked me for a headshot, and mine was so horribly outdated. Um, and I had to quickly find a photographer and get one done in like the matter of a week or something like that. And the problem is, I was 8 months pregnant when all of this happened and completely miserable. So, what you don't see in this picture is I couldn't actually find a shirt to cover my belly, and I'm wearing stretch pants, and I just hated every single moment of it. And now this picture shows up on LinkedIn and this event, and I always go, oh, I hate it, including my husband who thought I liked it, and he blew it up for my 40th birthday a couple of years ago too. So that was even worse. Giant picture of me on our barn. Anyway, good memories. So let's get to actually talking about why we're here and whatnot. Um, so I want to share a little bit about my career journey with all of you. And my career journey has been vast and wonderful. And I also want to make sure to save time, though, to talk about my pathway to actuarial and how I found it and some of the lessons I learned along the way. But I'll get started with my career path. I started my journey in Minnesota, which is where I'm from. I graduated from the Carlson School of Management, which is a business school at the University of Minnesota. So, Malika, you said you can come from lots of different backgrounds. I was a business student. I had an actuarial science degree, however, and a mathematics major, but most of my schooling was pretty heavy on the business side, mixed with math classes. I began at Travelers in 2005, which is a property and casualty insurance company. And I started in this great program that they have called the Actuarial Leadership Development Program. And essentially, it involved 3 years of rotating to different parts of the company and pairing that with technical and non technical training. So I had all these really great roles, and that continues throughout my career. But in that 3 year period, I worked in our oil and gas unit, and I worked on bond pricing. And bond pricing, essentially, I was working on, that's just a name that we use, but I was working on lawyers' errors and omissions. So when lawyers make mistakes and they get sued, because that happens, or architects and engineers, design professionals, if they build something and they screw up. And I also did some nonprofit D&O, so director and officers of nonprofits, if they get sued. It was really cool. This isn't what you think of when you think of math, right? I got to see all these different industries. I got to see a lot of what actuaries do as well, pretty much soup to nuts. So it's just a wonderful experience, and learning about all those different industries was really exciting. I want to call out in 2008. There were some women at Travelers, and they were forming a network called Women in Actuarial and Analytics. And I want to call this out because this was probably the beginning of some of my passion towards women in the workforce, and also developing communities in your life. So I got involved early on with this group, and I helped to form a subgroup that was called, or really focused, I would say, on professional development of women. And it was just such a great experience. And like I said, it emphasized just the importance of community in career and life. And I'm going to keep coming back to that. So then in 2009, a new group was formed in our company called Shared International. And I always had a passion, like personally, for traveling and whatnot. And I had gotten that European travel bug, a few years earlier. So I joined the team. I definitely networked a lot, and I met the right people, and I ended up getting a role with the group. And it was a 1 year role where I got to move to the UK for about 6 months. And while I was there, I realized I wanted to do this longer than 6 months. So I was very strategic about making that happen. Specifically when I found my next role, I made sure it had international exposure in it so I could put that on my resume again. So I joined a global unit that we had, which, although it was in the US, it was focused on global businesses like a Starbucks or something like that. And when I left that group, I actually was the actuarial lead for it. So I worked pretty hard and was promoted, which was great. And in addition to that, so that was part of me being strategic, I also kept my network with the UK team very strong. And I made them aware, I was very direct with them that I would be looking to join their team again someday. So anyway, we'll come back to that, but 2012 was a really big year for me, personally and professionally. I got married. I got my FCAS, which is my fellowship from the Casualty Actuarial Society. So I finished my exams. I still probably had nightmares about exams for another year or 2 years after that, but I finished them in 2012, so that was nice. And then I also I quit Travelers. So that's a big deal for me because I had been working there my whole career. But I'm kidding because I actually restarted at Travelers Lloyd's of London Syndicate. So my husband and I, we relocated ourselves to London. Um, and if you don't know what Lloyd's is, I really wish we could just sit and chat about it because I could do a whole session on it. And I have done sessions on it before, but they take like an hour. I love it so much. So we won't be able to cover that here. But essentially, Lloyd's of London is a marketplace for bespoke or large insurance needs that can't be placed in the standard insurance market. So you think about like Disney World, when they need insurance, they're so big. If something went wrong, one insurance company isn't going to want to be responsible for it, but 10 insurance companies might want to be responsible for it. And that marketplace enables that. Or think of unique things like kidnap and ransom insurance for celebrities like Beyonce, or large airlines or Paul McCartney's voice. I probably just dated myself. I'm a huge Paul McCartney fan. So maybe we'll go with like Taylor Swift or something like that. But really cool stuff. And I just had the most amazing experience personally and professionally. It's kind of sad, I will say to people, that I'm pretty sure I peaked in life happiness between 2012 and 2017, but I'm hoping there's multiple peaks, so we'll get there again. But over time, I became the business unit head actuary for many of the units there. So it was great for me professionally as well. I was running our property business, our power and utilities business, renewable energy, terrorism, construction. In addition, I really got to explore and develop my passion more for volunteering. So I did a lot of volunteer work. I won't go through all these, with the CAS on DE&I work. Um, and I also had a baby there, which, I was overseas and I'm sorry, but I had really good maternity leave and it was just an incredible experience. Then Brexit happened and I'll say life changed. It was time for us to come back to the US. However, we made a thoughtful, but I'll say it was a very hard decision to not go back to Minnesota. And we went to Connecticut to start a new journey. So I came back to a great role there. And I was leading our property reserving for non-cat business insurance. And all that means for everyone here is just that I was predicting losses. Um, and really it meant I was doing a lot of presenting and it gave me visibility in front of senior leaders I hadn't seen for 5 years. But I will be honest, I soon realized it wasn't the right role for me, which is the beauty of our field and also my company. Because instead of leaving my company or leaving actuarial because I wasn't happy, I looked internally for a new opportunity, and I could have looked external as well, where I could continue to develop and apply my actuarial skills, but in an area, that would actually interest me a little bit more. And I found the perfect one. I moved to form a new actuarial and advanced analytics team within our company, within our enterprise catastrophe risk management group. And that's where I am today. So my team is currently responsible for influencing and guiding how we think about cat perils like hurricane, tornado, hail, winter storm, wildfire, earthquake, all the stuff we're hearing about, climate. It's exciting. It's a non-traditional area for actuaries. Actuaries go into there, but it's not generally thought of as that. And it just challenges me in all the right ways. And I can feel the impact every day, I feel like, on my company, on insurance, and really society that me and my team are having. So, and finally, I want to say a couple more things here is that my passion. So I've got this weird Zoom bar that keeps popping up in front of my slides. I got to move it around. Finally, this passion for DEI. I had it internally and to my company, and I was doing a lot of things internally, but I wanted to bring it out, bigger and to the industry. And through a mutual friend in my network, I was introduced to two other women who had a similar passion, and we started NAWA, the Network of Actuarial Women and Allies. So more on that later, and our website is right here too if you want to learn more. But also last year, Malika, you mentioned this already, but I was elected to the CES board of directors. I ran on a DE&I platform. I will say I also ran while I was on maternity leave with a newborn, which is, I don't recommend that to everybody. I'm just going to say it was a lot of work. But I'm very grateful and I find it all very rewarding, but a lot of work with a newborn. But anyway, it's been a whirlwind. I think I'm very lucky to have had such an awesome career so far. But I want to go back for a second and I want to talk about how I found actuarial in the first place. When I was in high school, I knew I was good at math, like many of you probably do as well. But I knew nothing about what an actuary is. So when I got into a good business school, I just assumed I would follow in my father's and grandfather's footsteps. They went into finance, they were CFOs, they owned their own businesses. Sounds easy, right? It actually did not. And it actually seemed a bit overwhelming to me and not necessarily something I wanted to do. I just didn't really know what to do. And I looked around me and I didn't really know of any women at that time that were successful or doing anything with math. And that's just because of who I was surrounded by in my life. So it was around that time that my dad said that both him and his father, they wanted to be actuaries. But they said the testing process was too hard for them or they just gave up. They didn't even try. So I'm going to go back a little bit further. I'm going to give you a little more history about how me and my dad work. The picture here is of Haleakala. It's a mountain in Maui, and some of you may have been there. But my family went while I was in college. And one thing you're supposed to do is you're supposed to head up to the summit and you're supposed to watch the sunrise. And it's just beautiful, right? So my dad and we did just that. It was magical. It was such a great bonding experience with me and my dad. And I still remember it. I mean, I'm 20 plus years later here talking about it and just how beautiful the sun was that we saw. It was one of the prettiest things I literally have ever seen. Anyway, on our drive down, my dad said to me, I just want to say how great that was. Do you realize how high up you were? You were 10,022 feet high. And just so you know, Am, because he calls me Am, I was 10,023 feet because I found a rock that was higher than you and I stood on it. I won. So that was how me and my dad work. We just had a good laugh. He's a funny guy, but we have a very competitive relationship. And so now back to his comment about how actuarial testing was too hard for him. I honestly didn't know what an actuary was, but it was that moment when I realized I'm going to do that. Whatever it is, and however you spell that actuary thing or however you say it, I'm going to go beat him. And so it was my competitiveness that actually led to me wanting to be an actuary without even knowing really what it was. I don't recommend that, by the way, but it was sort of my road to discovery. So I started taking some classes. And early on, I'll be honest, I lost interest. I was an A student, but I was not always the best student. And I shouldn't admit that to some of you, especially professors here. I'm sorry, I'm going to say this, but there was a Calc 2 lecture. And there's maybe like 300 people in it. 298 of them at that time were men. And times have changed, but 20 plus years ago now. And one day, again, I shouldn't admit this, but I fell asleep in class. And I woke up and I had no idea what the teacher was talking about. I looked around. I said to the one female next to me, I said, is this Calc 2? She said, yes. I said, 1272. I went, oh, okay. And I wiped the drool off my cheek and because I was drooling and I walked out. And I walked away from math for about a year. And I just decided I was going to focus more on my business classes, in particular finance, marketing. But I will be honest, it wasn't challenging me the same way. And so one day I told a good friend this story and how I felt I was just missing math. And he said he'd love to introduce me to his mom, the actuary. So I agreed. I met her at work and she told me all about her journey and what it was like to be an actuary. And this was just monumental for me. Like I had never met such a successful woman in the first place. And she was like me. She liked math and business and she was empowered and she had her own office, which I thought was awesome. And really cool suit. And it was incredible. It was the first time I had seen someone like that. And I wasn't 100%, I still wanted to be an actuary, but my interest in it was renewed. And I realized I had to go back to math. And thus I entered what I would call as a true road to discovering myself, what I love. And I always enjoyed puzzles, mysteries, problem solving. I started to realize how fun math really was and how it would be a great way for me to use my problem solving skills. But it took really, I would say, a shift in how I viewed things to get there. And I eventually did decide that actuarial science really is something I wanted to pursue, and it was a good fit for me. It was really just the perfect combination of, I know you mentioned communication, Malika, but it was the math, the business, the creativity that really got me. And I didn't quite see it then, but I also feel now that I have a real impact on people's lives via insurance, and I'm just really grateful for that. So I would say long story short, but no, I gave you the long story, so it wasn't short. But I never looked back and I never regretted my decision. I have an amazing career so far and I love being an actuary. With that, if there's anything I can leave you with, it's that theme that networking and building relationships are essential. You should not only share your story with others, but you need to get to know other people's stories. You got to share and ask questions and be curious and reach out to as many people as you can. So it really can make all the difference, especially as you're trying to discover your passions and what you want to do in your future pathway. And one last thing I want to bring up is NAWA, not because it's my baby, but because it's a great way to make some of those connections. Uh, there's a lot on this slide, don't worry. Really, all I want to say is that our mission, you know, you already said it, Malika, it's just to connect and empower women to be successful in the profession. And that's not just those in the field, but it's those thinking about the field. So it applies to everyone here. And one of the aims we aim to do that is through creating communities. So it's a great way to get to know more women actuaries and allies at various stages in their career and the field. So anyway, I put the website down here, nawaactuaries.org. Maybe we could put it in the chat. I don't know. You can join as a member or a volunteer, which I also want to say is a great way to engage with more actuaries. And you can also find us on LinkedIn. But back to my pathway, I just want to say that everyone's journey is unique, and it's okay if yours is straight or broken. With that, I'm just very honored that I got to share mine with you today, even though it's a bit broken, but I found my way to the field and I've never regretted it since. For you, again, talk to as many people as you can, listen, ask questions. You can come find me on LinkedIn as well. I'm happy to answer any questions, or Malika and team were referring to the signups for next week as well. But with that, I can't wait to hear from some of the other panelists' stories and journeys. I want to thank you all so much for listening to mine. Thank you.
Thanks, Amber. That was awesome. So next up, we have Kuda Chibanda. So Kuda, take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, Malika. And thanks, Amber, for taking us through your career. That was really fascinating. I am going to share my screen as well, and I'm going to ask that you let me know once you can see.
Yep, we can see.
Okay. And since you said that, that also means you can hear me, right? Okay, great.
Yes.
So I'm going to take a slightly different tilt to my career perspective by taking you through some of the psychological things that I think happen when you are a woman in STEM and what that career looks like, right? Amber talked about her career kind of not being linear. What you're going to see from mine is, at least on paper, it very much is a linear career. But I still think exactly what she said was very key, which is it doesn't always need to be linear. And I think it'll be an interesting view into some of what I think it takes to make a career, especially as a woman in STEM. So I started off by putting this quote, which is actually something that I wrote on my college application. I was born and raised in Zimbabwe, and when I was applying to come to the US to go to college, I talked about how I felt like I needed to be a risk manager for everything, right? So I come from this place where there's a lot of poverty. Quite frankly, I didn't come from a very poor family, to be honest with you, but I saw a lot of poverty around me, and I saw that education was a privilege. And so I always felt like I needed to make good on every single first chance that I got. So this was kind of the mental state that I have always been since the beginning of my career. And so if I put my career on a page, right, in similar to what Amber just did for you, this is what it looks like. I went to St. John's. I graduated with an actuarial science degree. Never thought once about changing my major or, God forbid, walking out of a class and changing that. I so admire that, Amber. That never would have been me in college. I sort of was like, what is the curriculum? I'm going to take all the classes that I need to take. And I almost share my career perspective here as not quite a cautionary tale, but be careful of what you think you want from a linear career. So I studied actuarial science, graduated in 2009 in the middle of a recession as an international student at that. I started my career at Verisk Analytics, which lots of people know as ISO. And so I was in a traditional actuarial role. I was doing a lot of pricing of risks within the small business world, and really cutting my teeth on learning how to work with data. It was a really good experience for me. And very quickly thereafter, I got my ACAS, which is the first milestone in the actuarial exam landscape. I saw someone wrote in the chat, they were asking how many exams they are. I don't know how many exams they are now, but it's a lot of exams, and you will spend most of your 20s studying for actuarial exams, but it is still a rewarding career. So that was the first step for me. Then I decided to move into consulting. So I went to PwC, and there is where I became an FCAS. So I finished my exams pretty quickly after I had graduated, actually. So I was done with exams probably about less than 5 years, and after I graduated. So I was very much measuring myself against, like, how quickly can I do this and how quickly can I be successful. So I started at PwC in a traditional actuarial role, but then when I got promoted to being a manager, I actually decided to move into more of the data and analytics side of the house. And so I started doing a lot of what we call data science today, which at the time we just called predictive analytics. I then decided to go in-house to an insurance company and started really learning a lot more about the data science and analytics side of the house. And so this is where I kind of changed my career perspective, and I became fully known as a data scientist more than as a traditional actuary. And so the people on my teams were maybe people with similar backgrounds to you, where they studied mathematics at a very advanced level. Some of them were PhDs, and we were really involved with building models to help the company understand risk or to improve its operations. So we weren't just doing things that end up on the balance sheet anymore. We were doing a lot of things that are associated with trying to make the operations of a company better. I was elected to the CAS board in 2009. My term ended in 2022, which is why they have that. And then I was promoted to a vice president level. So as Malika mentioned, I'm the chief data and analytics officer for about a $3 billion book of business that we have for specialty lines. And at the same time, I also got my MBA from Columbia. So this looks very much like a linear sort of career of just every role that I took was always higher than the last one, and I was moving from stage to stage. But I actually want to take you through what my career was like in my head, right? So instead of being that linear path, this is what it mostly looked like, right? So when I was in college, I was like, what if I chose the wrong major? What's going to happen? Am I going to end up being sort of in the wastelands of a career because I studied actuarial science? And then when I went to Verisk Analytics, it was like, I have to prove myself. I have to show people that I know what I'm doing and that I'm good at math. And those of you, I mean, everybody on the call who's a woman knows this feeling, right? Where you feel like you have to prove yourself. And particularly if you're a woman of color, because there are not that many of us in STEM and even in the actuarial field. And so you always feel like you're holding up the banner of all Black women in my case, or all international women, because I wasn't American. When I was at PwC, it was like, well, what if I don't prove myself? What if I fail now? Like, I've done some good things, but what if I don't do well going forward from now? What does that mean? How do I, how can I hold up the flag for people from my country or my gender or my race? So that was sort of in the back of my mind. And then when I was promoted and sort of got into more of the data and analytics side, I was fretting about, oh my God, I don't have enough technical skills. I really need to, I taught myself how to code, and I started building all these models, but I always felt like I was behind the 8 ball because I hadn't studied a PhD in math. And then it became, oh no, I'm losing my technical skills because now I'm in leadership and I'm no longer the person building the models. And what if people think that I'm not supposed to get this role because I'm no longer the one building the models? So there was this constant sort of reevaluation of what's happening with my career. And even now, I would love to tell you that I'm in a place where I don't have that, but the reality is that's not always the case, right? So now I sometimes think to myself, oh no, I should have gotten a PhD because that would have credentialized me myself more. Or I recently had 2 babies a few months ago, actually. And so now I'm worried about, oh no, am I on the mummy track? Do people think I'm not invested in my career anymore? And another thing that's sort of underlying all of this is, what if everybody thinks I'm just here because I'm a diversity hire? And so there's this constant feeling of needing to overly credentialize yourself. And by the way, the things that I have done to credentialize myself, so the ACAS, the FCAS, the business school MBA, the board of directors, the promotions, all of that in my mind is sort of like things that don't count. You sort of don't count those things and instead focus on all of these fears. So part of the reason I wanted to talk to you about this and in this way is in a very interesting way, an actuarial career has actually helped me with some of this, because even if I put it to the side, there is something about the constant achievement that comes with a career where you keep taking exams, right? Where it's sort of like, even if you don't believe yourself, believe the piece of paper that says, no, you're actually qualified to do this because you have a credential, and you're qualified because you keep moving up in your career. And as you move more and more along your career, you also find that the combination of what you're trying to do from a career perspective and what you're trying to do from a family perspective, should you choose that path, is also going to be an important consideration. And I think all of that comes into the fore of what it means to have a career. I think sometimes we talk a lot about sort of the steps that we've done just from the work perspective, but a lot also happens psychologically that I would recommend that you take into consideration when you are choosing a career, because a lot of this can really derail you even if you're doing well. And so the last thing I'm going to leave with you is sort of what I would tell my younger self if I was still at the beginning of my career. And it is that my career was always written in pencil, but not ink, right? So even though I was so worried that like, oh, I studied the wrong thing, or am I taking the right role? Am I going to be able to prove myself? All of those things can be changed. And not only can all of those things be changed, the actuarial field in particular is well suited for people who are amenable to change. More than any other careers that I see, at least in the insurance landscape, people who come from who are in the actuarial field sometimes come from a variety of backgrounds, and sometimes they have a lot of experience and they pivot into actuarial, which is not a story that you typically hear in lots of different careers. And so just remember that whatever it is that you decide to start, your career is not written in stone at that point. You can always change it. The second thing that I would tell myself, which is kind of what I've been trying to say from the beginning, is I was very focused on the linearity of my career. I was focused on trying to move from step to step and really go up that ladder as quickly as I can. But that doesn't mean that that's the best way. right? I think sometimes, and in particular, sort of in media and particularly in social media, I think we're used to lionizing people who have accomplished things the quickest and who have seemed to climb up and risen up the ranks very quickly. And I'm here to tell you, as somebody who on paper that looks like what I've done, that isn't necessarily always the best way. You should think about the types of experiences you want to have. You should think about the things you want to learn. And that leads to my last point, which is a quote by Dr. Seuss. As I mentioned, I'm a new mother. My babies are 4 months old, and so I'm reading a lot of Dr. Seuss, which is something I never did when I lived in Zimbabwe. Dr. Seuss is a new thing for me. But one of the things that I learned that he said is, it is better to know how to learn than to know. And so as you start your career and you become more senior, just keep that in mind, that your ability to learn, which actuarial science teaches you, is going to be a far more important aspect of your day-to-day than actually knowing something. And you also should give yourself experiences where you learn how to trust your judgment. And sometimes when you take that linear path, you don't always learn how to trust your judgment. And so just keep that in the back of your mind, is seek out experiences that teach you how to learn and not necessarily that just give you knowledge. So that is my career in a nutshell.
Thank you, Kuda. I totally identified with that, my career in my head slide, and also with the Dr. Seuss situation that you're in. All right, so next up, our next speaker is Celeste Bremen. Celeste?
All right, thanks, Malika, and thank you, Kuda. I agree. A lot of what you said was kind of resonated with me as well. So I might bring up some of that as I go through my own slides. But let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. I think you all can see my PowerPoint that I have up.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, so my name is Celeste Bremen. I'm also a fellow of the Casualty Actuarial Society, and I'm going to go through my career so far, specifically with a focus on working internationally and learning from failure. All right, so a little bit first about who I am and why I love being an actuary. So as I mentioned, my name is Celeste. I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri, and after kind of moving around a little bit for work, I've been able to come back to my hometown where I now work remotely. I graduated from University of Pennsylvania with a major technically in economics, but I was in the business school, so I would consider myself more of a business major than an economics major. I also had the chance to, in addition to taking some of my business school classes, to also take some foreign language classes while I was in college, just because I thought they were fun, not necessarily because I thought they'd be useful. But as I'll talk about later, some of those actually did come in handy. After I graduated, I started working for Zurich in North America in the suburbs of Chicago. I was there for 3 years, and it was a great experience. There's a lot of actuaries who work there, and so it was very helpful to have those other more experienced people to talk to as I started off in my career. So it was a great experience. And I started in very traditional, not necessarily only traditional. I did some reserving work, which is considered traditional actuarial work, as well as some database management. While I was at Zurich, they have an international rotation program for actuaries who are interested in moving to different countries and maybe working there for a few years. So I applied, and after 3 years of working in the US, I moved to Sao Paulo, Brazil for 2 years, which was a great experience. I'll talk about that a little bit more. But while I was there, that's where I kind of transitioned a little bit more to more of a data science role, while also still being an actuary. And I really enjoyed that, and that kind of set my career on that path. Then I came back to the US, worked for Zurich in their data science department for about 2 years. And then after that, I worked remotely from the US for an Italian company that actually is not an insurance company. They are a telematics company. Some of you might be familiar with telematics. Basically, it's specifically used for car insurance right now, but basically your insurance company will either give you a device that you plug into your car, or they'll have you download an app, and they are able to collect information, very detailed information about the way you drive. So that might be how often you're braking, if you're accelerating a lot, even the time of day that you're driving. that sort of thing. And they use all of that information to kind of assess your risk and charge you a different premium for your insurance. Usually they'll charge you a lower premium. Right now, there aren't a lot of insurance companies charging you more. So they'll charge you a lower premium, or they won't charge you, or they'll charge you the same thing. So that was really interesting, a chance for me to use my data science and insurance skills, but kind of in a different environment. So that was really interesting. And now I'm doing something different again. I'm working in the clean energy space for a company called New Energy Risk. They're based out of the San Francisco Bay Area. And what we do is we help these companies that are trying to create innovative clean energy products to get financing. So a lot of the times they'll be trying to get financing from banks. The bank will say, well, your product's kind of new. I'm worried I'm going to give you this money and I'm not going to get it back because your product's not going to work the way you think and you're not going to generate revenue. So what we do is we work with the engineers to assess that risk. And we say, look, if the product doesn't perform as expected, we'll pay some of that money back to the lender. So it's been, I guess, one of the things that I love about being an actuary is, that ability to do really different things. I never would have thought when I was in college that I would, work in telematics, or that I'd be, working with engineers to price clean energy insurance. But I think that's one of the exciting things about being an actuary is there are a lot of different ways to use your skill set, to use math to basically solve business problems. So that's one of the things that I enjoy about this job, is being able to do that. All right. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about my experience working internationally. So my first experience working internationally was when I was in Brazil. And as you can imagine, it was a difficult but really rewarding experience. Of course, one of the rewarding things was learning Portuguese. I mentioned when I was in college, I took some foreign language classes. So one of the foreign language classes I took was Portuguese. I was also studying Spanish at the time and just took it because I thought it would be fun and I had some space in my schedule. So I figured, why not? But it actually came in handy when I moved to Brazil. So I'm a big advocate of, if there's something that you're interested in and you have the time and, space in your schedule to take it, go ahead. At the very least, it's fun. And sometimes you might even use it later. I especially think that's true for foreign languages. Of course, working in another country and another culture was really challenging, but also really interesting, just seeing how things work in different places. And it also gave me the confidence to know that I can adapt to new environments, not just at work, but also in my personal life. It's a pretty different culture. And so it did give me that confidence to know that, okay, I did this one time, I can be adaptable again if I need to. And in fact, that came in handy when it came time for me to eventually leave Zurich. I had only worked for Zurich for, at this point, it was 7 years in my career when I decided to make a change and work for this telematics company. And having worked in Brazil, I felt more confident knowing that, okay, I did something different. I can probably do this too. Working remotely for an Italian company was interesting. While I was still living in the US while I did this, this was a smaller company, about 400 people, and I think probably about 300 of them were based in Italy, and there were maybe 40 or 50 in the US, the rest spread out around the globe. This was interesting because eventually during my time there, I became a manager and all of my direct reports were based in Italy. So I had a lot of contact with people in yet another culture. And it was a great opportunity to just learn from them. And while this is an Italian company, we did have clients around the globe, and as I mentioned, coworkers around the globe. And I think having that opportunity really forced me to do a couple of things that were good for my career development and for personal development too. One of those was being a better listener. Sometimes when you're working with people in different parts of the globe or clients in different parts of the globe, the problems that you're trying to solve might be different than in the country that maybe you're used to. And so it really forces you to learn how to ask those questions about what the problem is that they're trying to solve or what their experience is like, because it might be different from what you're used to. It also forced me to be more thoughtful about the way I communicate. So one of those is, besides just language, for example, speaking to someone who's maybe not a native speaker, I could see, okay, maybe I need to be careful about the sort of slang I use, or maybe if I say something and I can see someone still confused, maybe I can rephrase it in a way that they can understand more easily. So it's kind of a master class, I guess, in knowing your audience and knowing how to communicate with them. But also, just aside from language, just the way people like to communicate. For example, in the US, when I was working at Zurich, it's really common to send somebody an instant message, send someone an email if you have a question. In Brazil, a lot more common to just go up to their desk and talk to them. Also a lot more common to, before you start a conversation, we do some of this in the US too, but really kind of make it personal, ask them how they're doing, do a little bit of small talk. That's considered, the polite thing to do before you, just ask someone a question. Even in email, you might do some of that. So I thought that was interesting. And finally, it also kind of having some of these coworkers or clients in different parts of the globe also forces you to be creative when solving problems. Sometimes the problems are different, or not just problems, but also opportunities are different in different countries. And so you might not have a particular data set available in another country, or maybe there's a particular variable you would use in pricing that you can't use in another country, or that you can use in another country but you can't use in yours. And so I think that forces you to be creative when solving problems. Sometimes the problems are different, and so that forces you to be creative on its own. Sometimes they're the same and you just have to solve them in a different way. So I think that's a really great experience. And one of the other things that I enjoy about being an actuary, it is very analytical, but we're trying to solve practical problems for the business. And that does require some creativity, which I think is a lot of fun. So I know in the chat, we've had a lot of questions about exams. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my exam progress, and you will see that the theme is learning from failure. So I think you can already guess that I failed a lot along the way. So my time from my first exam to getting my ACAS, my associateship level credential, was 6 years. I took my first exam at the very end of my freshman year in college, and then I got my ACAS, I think maybe about 3 years after I graduated from college. So that first step was 7 exams. So there were 7 passes, but I also failed at least 9 times along the way. So quite a few fails. And then my time from ACAS to FCAS was another 6 years. Part of that, the whole time I was in Brazil, was part of that 6 years. So that's another 3 passes and another 6 fails. I can see one of the questions that's coming in. Do you have a certain attempt of limits on exams? You do not. So some people take even more attempts at the exams. Everybody's different is one of the takeaways from this. And I'm actually kind of grateful that I had this experience failing exams. It's not, of course, nobody likes to fail. It's not very fun, but I did get some important takeaways from it. It taught me how to be resilient, especially when you start failing exams at the very beginning. I passed my first exam on my first try, second exam, failed it. It's disappointing, especially, you might not be used to failing an exam. And, over time I could see, okay, I failed. I'm going to pick myself back up and I'm going to try again. And I could see that, okay, I'm failing, but I'm also passing. And so, I just have to be resilient and see what I can do differently next time. Maybe I need to do more practice problems. Maybe I need to just study more. Sometimes you will just find yourself signing up for an exam and life happens, or maybe you get a little bit disorganized, especially when you're first starting to study for the exams, and you learn how to adjust and not make that same mistake the next time. And also just taught me to have confidence in myself, especially by the time I got to my ACAS. I was so used to failing exams that it was less upsetting when I did fail. Some of the FCAS exams are only offered once a year, so if you fail that exam, you have to wait another year to take it. But by that point, I had that confidence in myself that I knew that I can do something different and I can hopefully get a different result next time. Then I know we've talked a lot about exams and there's been a lot of questions, but I do just also want to highlight that, yes, it's important to pass exams if you want to be an actuary, but obviously there's a lot more to being an actuary and a lot more to life than just passing your exams. If I were thinking purely about exams, going to Brazil was a poor choice for my exams. I was there for 2 years and did not pass any exams. Then I came back to the US and started passing exams again. Part of that was because I was working longer hours in Brazil, so just didn't have as much time to study. But having said that, working in Brazil was a great experience, and I'm really glad I did it. Similarly, I've heard from some people who maybe stopped taking exams for a while because they have kids, and like I said, life happens. A lot of other things can happen too, and that's okay. Exams will always be there. You can always come back to them at a later point when you're ready, if that's what you want to do. So that's my takeaway. Kind of have that balance between focusing on the exams and just your personal life and maybe some other career goals that you have along the way too. There are other important things to focus on too. All right. So I think that's it from me, and I will stop sharing my screen. And thanks so much.
Thank you, Celeste. And there's just like a lot going on in the chat, which is awesome. One thing I'll say is we've heard from a couple actuaries who've worked internationally now. And while there are other organizations internationally which provide credentials, they're pretty much recognized around the world. So if you're an associate or a fellow of one of these organizations, it does give you kind of a great foundation to be able to go and work elsewhere if that's something you're interested in. So last but not least, Sherry Chan, take it away.
Thank you. Let me pull up my screen and do a full screen here. So, I was listening to the other ladies, and it's amazing how much parallel we have, and I'll touch on that during my talk. But I will say, thank you for this invitation to join the Association for Women's in Mathematics. I think it's a great topic because I myself started out as a math major at The Ohio State University. And I asked myself, what am I going to do with my math degree, right? And this theme that, the answer to my question is a theme that I think carries throughout my career, including today. And I knew that I wanted to use math in a, applied setting, applied mathematics. I wanted to use it for, to solve real world problems. And I also knew that I wasn't, the research type. And so when I came across, it was actually a brochure that the Society of Actuaries put out at the math department at my school. And it talked about it being the #1 job and how it's, supposedly low stress, although the exams are pretty stressful. And all this great stuff selling the profession. And I said, this is perfect because it allows me to use my mathematical skills in a business setting. And then I kind of fell in love with the profession from then on, and was full steam ahead in that regard. And so starting my actuarial journey, I did internships in both life insurance as well as pensions. And I fell in love with pensions because it was, a happy event at the end of one's chapter of working, right? Everybody looks forward to being in retirement and having to not work and still get a paycheck of sorts. And so I went down that route, and I had some international internships as well as domestic with a firm that's now called WTW. Got to work in Hong Kong in an international setting and helping them set up their government program for pensions over there. And then in my late 20s, I got offered the position of chief actuary for the state of Ohio at State Teachers Retirement System of Ohio. So they take care of the retirement benefits for the teachers in the entire state of Ohio. And, I was a pension actuary on staff for them, and also served as chief actuarial officer at Ohio PERS, which is the Ohio Public Employees Retirement System. So it was my foray into the public sector and working for government employees and making sure that they had the pension available to them after their long career. I thought I would stay there for, the rest of my life in Ohio, but I did get recruited over to the city of New York. Their chief actuary was retiring in 2014. And so I went through the interview process, and a year later, a little bit less, but calendar year later, I ended up in New York City doing very similar work, being the chief actuary for the 5 retirement systems of the city, for police officers, firefighters, teachers, and public employees, and those that work at a school that don't teach, so the Board of Education. And a couple of years ago, I made the decision of, wanting to really marry the business aspect of it, right? At the City of New York, I was managing a city agency, and it allowed me to, see the side of business other than just the actual technical work, right? So we thought about things like succession planning and budget management and IT security and employee morale and all that. And, I wanted to take that business side of it to the next level. And so I pursued a chief strategy officer role with an insurtech startup. So Adidot is a insurtech, which is a subset of fintech. So insurtech is a technology startup specifically in insurance. And Adidot is focused on the life insurance side, where we use AI to help the life insurance ecosystem predict their client behavior, their customer behavior better, so that no money is left on the table. We provide them the insights such as what is it that the policy holder would likely buy, how much of it would they buy, how long would they hold on to it, and other areas that we assist the ecosystem with. And I bring this up because during my journey, much like the other ladies, I also pursued my executive MBA, knowing that I always wanted to apply my actuarial skills in a setting, in a business setting, and leveraging both that aspects of it. And I'll just say one thing about my career journey, my exam journey as well. I very much relate to what Celeste was saying, and I might even have her beat in terms of taking so long to get through my exams. I think that was something that I used to not highlight, but as I come out on the other end, that's something that I very much want to share with people, because the actual exams is something that you need to get through to be credentialed, and you can be very discouraged through it. But I think with perseverance, and believing in yourself and knowing that you can do it, you can get through the exams. For my first exam to my fellowship of the Society of Actuaries took me 18 years. I will say I did probably take maybe half a decade off going to business school, and these big job changes across state borders and stuff like that. But sticking through it, I think it does pay off at the end. And some of the other points that I'll touch on is networking. It's an aspect of networking, which is volunteering. That was something that I believe one of the ladies had talked about previous to me, about the importance of just getting out there, talking to people and learning, right? And I think volunteering is a part of that. It's not just, we are so used to and accustomed to thinking of volunteering as us giving back to, the community, but volunteering can also be a learning experience. I currently sit on the board of the American Academy of Actuaries. My term actually ends next Wednesday. I was elected onto the Society of Actuaries board that is coincidentally going to start next Wednesday. And so, these opportunities have opened my knowledge base up to, being able to meet people I wouldn't otherwise be able to work with, and being able to manage projects that, that might not be worked on at my employer, or, developing skill sets that are beyond what my employer at the time might be able to provide me, right? Such as managing people or presentation skills, or some more technical actuarial topic that we might not have exposure to, or at least not as in depth at the employer. Conference of Consulting Actuaries, I do a lot of volunteering, speaking, strategic initiatives with them. So it's a wide variety. I think there's plenty of opportunities out there to give back and also to learn in the community. As far as board service, Abacus Actuaries, as Malika said, was something that I started a few years ago during the height of anti-Asian hate crime. And I just asked myself, what can I do for the community, right? I can't be out there as someone who's 5'4", you know, defending the grandmas that were being literally beaten to death on the streets and on the subways and all that. But, you know, what is it that I can contribute back to my AAPI community? And I leveraged my strongest network, which was the actuarial network, and looked into issues like the bamboo ceiling, which is specific backgrounds of the Asian culture that kind of prevent them from being promoted, right? There's a lot of statistics out there that Asians are represented in the professional world, but it's it proves more difficult for them to get promoted within any profession. And so I started this nonprofit to help with this cause and to you know, make sure that the Asian actuaries and their allies are equipped with the skill sets that are needed to see this promotion through the actuarial profession. Ohio State University is something that I also am on the board for their College of Arts and Science. It's an academia board. And I share this with you because I think being a part of, you know, a board brings a lot of experience in how to run a business and how to run an organization. I think with that skill set, it's a return on your career investment in terms of promotion. And if you are interested in those C-suite positions of running an organization, understanding all aspects of it, you know, from that level is very important to be successful. And then on the next slide, you know, for those that are interested in pursuing insurtech opportunities that might overlap with actuarial science, I provide some resources here. And let me just really quickly, I sent a chat message that includes these links because I know you can't click on these links right here. The first one is Inspiring Actuaries. Chelsea is a FCAS and is an actuary who puts out a lot of material content on social media about, you know, persevering through exams and, you know, giving a view of how it is to work in insurtech as well as, you know, passing your exams and getting through that exam journey. The Society of Actuaries has an insurtech advisory council that I'm on. We put out webinars. We are meeting at a big insurtech conference in a couple of weeks. We put out papers. So if anyone is interested in kind of being more involved and learning about the insurtech sphere, that's another resource. The third bullet is if you want to kind of jump into these job opportunities, the first of which is Plug and Play. It's an incubator that's out of California, Silicon Valley area, as well as a insurtech company that you can go to see what job openings, specifically actuarial openings, there are if you're interested. And lastly, if you're ambitious enough, you can always start your own firm. If you are interested in starting your own insurtech company or even an actuarial company that leverages some kind of tech, these might be some of the resources that you look into. This talks about some of the incubators are more of ideation, like you might have an idea, but it's not quite solidified. So you work with mentors and other folks to kind of solidify it and test it to go to market. Accelerator usually is for companies, startups that might have a proven product already, but they want to scale. And so those are some of the resources out there. And, you know, I can be found on LinkedIn. I can be found on the actuarial directory. So if anybody's interested in, you know, reaching out to me directly to have a conversation, obviously we have the opportunity next week, but feel free to reach me in those channels as well.